Hi there, my name is Allison DeMiro and this is my research proposal. So to start out, I'm really passionate about teacher retention. There is a really big problem with teacher retention right now, especially in the state of Wisconsin. So teacher retention is the rate at which teachers remain in the teaching profession, and teacher attrition is the rate at which teachers leave the profession. So I'm going to be looking to study retention factors, so the reasons that teachers stay in the profession, in order to come up with some solutions for how we can increase the rate at which we retain our highly effective educators. The questions that have been guiding my research so far are: why are teachers leaving the profession? What can schools do to retain highly effective educators? Is it possible to increase teacher retention and cut school costs? And are teacher retention factors different by grade level or location of the school? So the graphic that you see at the bottom of the screen mentions a pretty staggering statistic that there has been a 34% rise in the annual attrition rates for first-year teachers since the year of 1988. So starting at year one, teachers leave at a rate of 13%, after 3 years, 33%, and then after 5 years, between 40 to 50% of the teachers are leaving the profession. And this is a nationwide statistic, not just Wisconsin. So my research findings have been really useful in terms of trying to develop what factors I want to focus in on my research. So you can see here that there have been several studies about teacher retention. The first study that I wanted to mention was one about millennial teachers. They identified that they needed a program to help them understand the school process and expectations and where they could go if they had questions or needed assistance. So that would be some sort of mentoring program or onboarding program. That's what millennial teachers identified as the most important thing when they were looking for a school or where they were feeling successful at a school. So most millennial teachers said that they felt underprepared for their first year of teaching, and that led to having a bad experience and them wanting to find a new profession. The second piece of research I'd like to discuss is another set of interviews that were conducted. So this was for pre-service teachers, and it was in order to try and identify what was preventing teachers from teaching in urban schools. So the top reasons that people weren't teaching in urban schools were lack of resources, low salaries, and an excessive workload. As many of you might have heard of before, there's something called compassion fatigue. That is something that many people experience in urban schools because of the conditions. So only half of the pre-service teachers said that they would attempt working in an urban school, and most of the people who said they would attempt it went through an urban school themselves or had previous experience in an urban school. The last piece of research I'd like to highlight is just some statistics around how many people have left the teaching profession. So there's an estimated 50% of teachers who will leave the profession in the next 5 to 7 years. And 20% of all new hires leave within the first 3 years, which is related back to that graphic I showed you on the previous slide. Other important factors, only 5% of multicultural staff versus a 40% multicultural group of students. So you can see that there is a big gap in students being able to see themselves and the teachers who are trying to help them learn. Biggest challenges today are the fact that there is a shrinking teacher workforce and a growing student population. And we also have a lack of diversity in staff and a lack of specialized teachers. So these are all reasons why the study of teacher retention is really important. Some other research I'd like to mention are just some of the models that have proven effective for some schools in terms of increasing their teacher retention and also cutting costs. So in the first study that I have here, it was a multi-method qualitative study. They looked at 20 teachers and discovered that in-service training programs were essential to the success of first-year teachers. So I had previously mentioned that piece of research in the millennial teachers and what they said was important for them. The onboarding process and a mentor program is one of the main factors that is important in terms of teacher retention. The next piece also talks about having an online or an onboarding process for teachers. And then this piece of research looked at improving that program from year to year. So surveys were given out to try and figure out what was working and what was not. And then the last piece of research here by Moore talks about how a school was able to save almost $1 million when it increased its rate of teacher retention. So not only is that helping students have more consistency, but it's also helping the school to save money. So these are 3 pieces of research I'm using to try and come up with my own model of what factors are important when it comes to increasing teacher retention. So my main research question I'm looking at is what factors contribute to higher rates of teacher retention in Wisconsin schools specifically. My independent variables, there are a lot of them. I'm going to be gathering information on teacher age, number of years that teachers have been in the profession, what kind of education teachers have had, what professional development opportunities there are, their views on their administration in terms of how supportive they are, views on school culture, and if there is an existence of a mentor program for new teachers. My dependent variable is looking at the teacher retention rate and how all these independent variables contribute to that. Where I'm looking to do this is at elementary, middle, and high school. I'm going to be talking to teachers and administrators, and I'm going to be looking at 3 different types of schools: rural, urban, and suburban schools. And the teacher demographics I'm looking at are teachers who have been there between 1 to 30 years. The form of my research is going to be a mixed methods approach. In order to gather quantitative data, I'm going to be conducting an online survey, and then my qualitative methods will be an open-ended survey questions at the end of that online survey and also personal interviews.